Hey, it's Tech. Welcome to Off the Cuff. This is part 2 of my best average theaters of 2016. If you didn't see part 1, go watch the other video. I'm going to put a link on the screen and in the description below. Go check that out. It's about the resolution and sound systems of current theaters and how to get the best, or how to find the best movie-going experience in your area with digital cinema. This is part 2, and once again, I'm using as my source material for comparison Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So yeah, there might be some spoilers in here. I'm going to talk a lot more in detail in this one about a couple scenes than I did in the last one, so spoiler alert. But today we're going to be talking about 3D technologies, the digital formats, the major players, and what to expect when you go to theaters using different 3D technologies. So there are 4 major theater technologies and one very, very, very minor theater technology used for 3D in theaters today. The IMAX 3D is a big one, and they're only in the digital IMAX theaters or the Science IMAX theaters. The second is RealD. They are the biggest around the world. They have the most screens. And as I'll say later, arguably they are the best experience. Maybe Dolby is better. Dolby 3D is has a low number of screens, but has a fairly good experience. And then MasterImage 3D, which has the second most number of screens, but is by far the worst experience that you can get. The fifth one is XpanD, XpanD 3D. And their experience deals with active shuttering. You'll find them more on home televisions than in theaters, but which is unfortunate because XpanD is the best. It just costs the most. Anyway, so without any further ado, we're going to dive in and talk about the different forms of 3D exhibition in digital theaters and their pluses and minuses and what works. So first of all, the biggest problem with 3D, there's 2 big problems. The first one is light loss. When you put filters over your eye and you put filters over the projector, you lose light. It's the #1 killer of any 3D technology. It brings your average brightness of the projector down by upwards of 60%. That's a lot of brightness lost. The projector filters it, then it's reflected from the screen, and then your eyeglasses filter it, and everything is less than ideal. At best, if you're using a single camera with high-speed switching, at very best, you can expect 50% at each eye. That's not the reality. The very best right now is RealD and the high-end MasterImage 3D, which has very few locations, both of which do 35% light transmittance from what the projector had, which is, pretty good, and your eyes can adapt to, but at the same time it's dark and you do lose detail. Anything lower than that, you have huge problems on your hands. You lose way too much detail, and that's the biggest drawback of MasterImage's common format, which I'll talk about in a minute. Second is what's called crosstalk or ghosting. Crosstalk is where your right eye sees part of the left eye's image and the left eye sees part of the right eye's image. Now, theoretically, if these filters were perfect, you would never have crosstalk, but they're not perfect. They use science, and the science is not ideal in all cases. And what ends up happening is, especially in the brights, anything using polarized, which is MasterImage, RealD, and IMAX, the brights have crosstalk. Little lights. A really good scene from Star Wars, if you've seen it, is when Kylo Ren and General Hux are talking in Snoke's little hologram room. There's these little pot lights, which are pure white on almost black. And they sit there, and in almost all 3D formats, they have these triplicate images. One, which is what you're supposed to be seeing, and then the 2 ghosts on either side. And you'll see that all through the film. All of the brights end up ghosting pretty heavily in all of the polarized technologies. They didn't ghost in Dolby 3D because the technology is different in how that works. And when I come to it, I'll explain why they don't ghost. So, apart from the other 3D artifacts, that ghosting is a big problem and is the biggest thing that you notice, which is actually why RealD comes out king. RealD of all the polarized ones, uses circular polarization, which means that instead of just up and down or left and right light, it's doing a clockwise rotation, or this is counterclockwise rotation, or a clockwise rotation. And so what ends up happening is it's a lot more tolerant to head tilt. So you're sitting there with the glasses on in the theater, and you lean over to one side, you lean over to the other side, and your image doesn't change. You don't get more crosstalk because of the glasses, because of your head position. That is the same thing that MasterImage uses. These are MasterImage glasses, by the way. They are fully cross-compatible between the two. You can use MasterImage glasses in RealD venues and RealD glasses in MasterImage venues because they both use circular polarization. And what ends up happening with the MasterImage ones and with the RealD ones is you do get ghosting, but it's just because of the limits of polarization in general. With the exception that what RealD does is they have an algorithm. They have a live version, and they used to burn it into the actual 3D files themselves. But the idea is that it's going to calculate the areas of the highest crosstalk and add a negative to the opposite eye's image. So if I'm going to see a little bit of spill in my left eye from the right eye's image, it's going to burn in a negative portion of the right eye's image to kind of to eliminate it. And its effect is quite stark when you watch films back to back to back like I did. It was overall sharper, especially in the mids, like anything below probably, 8-bit digital value about 200 in my estimation. So pretty much anything in the mids and the lows and close to the highs just basically ended up sharper because there was no crosstalk. Except when it failed. When the algorithm fails, the crosstalk gets worse because now it's burned in to that eye's image and you're able to see that issue a little bit more. So, but overall, that worked a lot better because there's a lot less crosstalk in RealD than there was with MasterImage, except on the moments where the algorithm failed, in which case it was a hair worse. But overall, RealD, which is the most common, it's the cheapest for theaters to implement because they lease the equipment and it's just the skim off the top of the ticket sales that goes back to RealD to pay for it. It is arguably the best average 3D experience. MasterImage, if they're using either, they have two main cheap solutions for 3D, one of which is a rotating polarizing filter that sits outside the camera with a quarter wave plate positioned elsewhere to give you the circular polarization. The new one is essentially a mimic of the RealD Z screen, which they call the Wave D. Is that what they called it? Let me just double check that. Yeah, the Wave 3D module. The Wave 3D module has 19% light transmittance. It was so dark. It lost all of the detail in the darks, no color in the darks, no very little detail. The whites were gray, mid-tone gray, and my eyes could not adjust to it. It was that bad. If you can avoid it, don't watch it with that low of light transmittance. Now, I finally understand why some friends of mine who have, said, oh, 3D is too dark. I finally feel what they said about it. It was really bad. The opening sequence, which is kind of at night, the lightsaber battles in the dark, anything that was inside, basically anything that wasn't outer space looked terrible. So I do not recommend that. I scored it, what did I score it? I scored it a D, so avoid it if possible. It is a worse experience than 2D. And that's the first time I've said that about a 3D technology. It's also the first time I was able to get to a MasterImage place because it was the first time I found one close enough for me to go to. So avoid MasterImage. RealD, which is more common, is a better bet. In my last video, I recommended that the best viewing experience was IMAX, and I'm going to actually stand by that even in 3D. The IMAX 3D is not as good as RealD in some aspects, but it's better in others, and so you end up with this trade-off. IMAX 3D uses two projectors. Okay, so rather than having to quickly alternate with one thing, they do a triple flash on RealD where it goes left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and that's one frame. Then left, right, again, that's another frame. and the projector is constantly alternating polarizations. That's what the Z screen does. IMAX has 2 projectors sitting there with dedicated filters. So one is a vertically polarized, one is a horizontally polarized image. And what that does is it allows for a lot higher brightness. That switching drops the projector's brightness. The screen in front drops that projector's brightness. Whereas with IMAX, you're using 2 projectors, so it's already twice as bright without that high-speed switching, which reduces or improves the overall detail and brightness of the image going to each eye. So its light loss is closer to around 50%, which is about the maximum based on what it was, which is the 2 projectors, which is about the same brightness as a single 2K screen without any of those filters. So basically, your average brightness in the IMAX is as good as your average 2K non-3D projected brightness, so which is great, and that is amazing. The downfall, and this is a huge downfall, is IMAX 3D is linearly polarized. What that means is that if I have my glasses, here you can see them here, and I put the opposites, you see how that goes black, okay? So now if I align them so that they're both facing the exact same way, they're more or less clear until I tilt my head. As soon as I tilt my head, it starts to darken. And that darkening has a kind of a problem because it only takes about 5 degrees of head tilt to start getting increased crosstalk in the whites. By about 12 degrees, your midtones are fully crosstalked and you can't distinguish the one image from the other. So if you're going with a significant other and you're leaning your head on their shoulder or just a little bit tired and slump over in your chair, you lose the crosstalk and the 3D effect comes in, and that's a big problem. So overall, like that kills the IMAX 3D, but the better detail is a huge draw. So if you can sit up straight, it's a great 3D experience. In fact, if you're sitting up straight, I would rank its overall 3D experience the best of everything because of the rest of the IMAX digital experience, which I talked about in the last thing. It's sound, the large screen, the brighter image, huge, huge, huge deal. So I would rank IMAX 3D at about a B+. The technology is worse than Real D, better than MasterImage, but the rest of the IMAX technology makes up for it in spades, which makes it my #1 recommendation. If you want a great movie-going experience, go to IMAX. Whether it's 2D or 3D, go to IMAX. The last image, the last common one that you're going to find in theaters is Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision is based on a type of separation called wavelength multiplex. It was invented by Infinitec GmbH, which was a division of, I want to say, Daimler Chrysler. Basically, what they do is the lenses are kind of a modern, evolved version of anaglyph 3D. Don't ever see a movie in anaglyph 3D if you can avoid it. But Dolby Vision is not bad. What they do is, rather than just having a pure color filter on each eye, they take advantage of the fact that, as I mentioned before, the primary colors on each digital projectors are kind of these broader areas and not pure wavelength primary. So what these do is they separate those, instead of one continuous lump, into 2 lumps. So you have a red one and a red 2, and a green one and a green 2, and a blue one and a blue 2. And then each eye essentially gets its own set of primary colors. That's why there's no crosstalk, or very little crosstalk, in the Dolby 3D tech, because you have essentially pure primaries unique to each eye, and that gets rid of the crosstalk in the highs. The disadvantage, though, it lets in more light, which is a better advantage. The disadvantage, and this is a disadvantage, is there is a slight hue coloring to it. So if you can see through these, I don't know, is it even going to read on camera? This lens here is a little bit magenta. This one here is a little bit green. So there is a slight coloring that your brain adapts to. In Star Wars, I found it really problematic only on fully saturated colors. So oranges and reds were the worst. I was getting an iridescence, which I know is my brain telling me I'm trying to reconcile the image from the 2 eyes, and they're not reconciling. I've looked for that in the past. It's kind of a flicker. So on the sides of people's faces when they're illuminated in red, or the red flashing panels on lights behind them. You would get this iridescence. One would be more orange, one would be more red, pure red, if I were to close each eye and switch between them. The X-Wing fighter jumpsuits for all the pilots, they would have this flicker iridescence that my brain couldn't quite reconcile the color. Blue was the other problem, but only really on pure blues. So the closer I got to pure blue, really was the lights in the background in the Millennium Falcon. The panel lights blinking blue, they would iridesce. You'd have one a little bit more cyan, the other one a little bit more deep blue. But overall, that was where the worst color shifts were. It wasn't too bad, and it was okay. I was just focusing on it, which kind of made it stand out to me. But overall, the color is really great, and there's a lot less crosstalk, to the point that where all of the polarized systems failed, that scene, or the scenes in the hologram room with Snark, with the white on black, you had the pure pot lights on the Dolby Vision and no crosstalk at all, which was a really nice thing to see. But the iridescence kind of hurt it. Overall, though, I would rank it as slightly better than Real D, or at least on par. There's the trade-off. You can decide whether you prefer the iridescent flicker of color or the crosstalk of Real D. So I ranked it as a solid B. So it improves the experience. It's not alone so much better than anything else. The last thing, which is very rare to find in theaters, is XpanD. They are active shuttered glasses. They are a lot more expensive, non-disposable, have to be picked up and recharged and quality controlled after every showing. And so a lot of theaters have abandoned them. The active shuttering, IMAX used to use them back in the 80s and 90s before they switched over to linear polarization. But they it's expensive to maintain, essentially. And so when you're looking for cheaper technologies, XpanD isn't what you want to use. But for home viewing, they are really great. They have close to a perfect 50% light transmittance, and there's no crosstalk, which is really important, because you essentially have little liquid crystal display shutters that black out each eye individually, though with a little bit of high frequency shifting. I like it. Some people don't. They're a little bit heavier of glasses. It is what it is. So those are the four main and one kind of out there 3D technologies you're going to find in theaters today and ranked. So once again, go for Real D if you want to just watch it in 3D but don't want the IMAX experience. Avoid MasterImage. Dolby is a great choice if it's near you. A lot of things are moving over to Real D or MasterImage, though, because it's cheaper at the point of projection, so the theaters don't have to spend as much of their own money. And then IMAX 3D is the best experience because of the IMAX portion of it, not as much because of the 3D technology. So between the last video, part 1, and this video, part 2, I hope you've been able to kind of get a grasp of what's going on in theaters today, how you can make the best decision for you, find a great theater where you are, and until, one other thing, if you can find a Sony 4K theater with Real D projection, it has fewer crosstalk, doesn't have the high frequency switching, so it's a little bit better because it uses two 2K images on the 4K sensor, essentially, and has them individually polarized, so that's pretty good. So anyway, until next time, I'm Tech Adams saying keep thinking, and thanks for watching.